delivery partners, to project managers, to program implementers, so right down from the high-level people to the people who actually implement. There's a whole set of audiences who might find tools and guidelines around project interventions useful. And usefulness is the key thing here. Okay, we're not actually talking about high-level research instruments. We're talking about practical, useful things. One of the people I spoke to said, imagine you're some little person newly appointed into a CSI position in somewhere out there by the mines, and your CSI boss comes to you and says, please, we've got to do some CSI, we've got to spend some money, go find a project. And it was kind of that person we were thinking about. And I think the people over here from Synergy said, you're not educationists, you need some help. So it's to kind of bring together the worlds of like educational discourse and some of the people who end up implementing stuff in educational contexts who may not be that familiar with that discourse. The characteristics of these guidelines and tools are that they're easy to use, they're short, they're visual, they're practical, mainly operational, accessible, jargon-free, and adaptable to different contexts and project types. So there was a very sort of strong sense that if we're doing a guideline for that kind of audience, these are the characteristics we need to bear in mind. So it's different to the kinds of uses that universities or evaluation organizations or researchers might need. I think that's the kind of key point. Out of the work that we've been doing, these were some ideas. And these were not things that Bridge was necessarily going to generate. These were things that were maybe needs, and some of them already exist. As I said earlier, one of our roles is to make information and resources available, because there's lots of stuff out there, but often people don't know where to go to find it, and that's where Bridge comes in. So whether these were things that we might develop or adapt, or whether we might point people to them, these were some of the ideas. So we are talking about a little Bridge series of guidelines on key lessons for some of those things. We're still thinking around those kinds of things. Things like guidelines for the management of stakeholders, for example. If you read the JET book on systemic interventions, there's a whole set of those in there. We might pull them out and make it into a little resource. Guidelines for determining school functionality is where we're sitting around this discussion. Chikalulu has a tool already around that, which I'll talk to a bit. Research indicates that schools need to meet certain functionality criteria in order for the investment to be worthwhile. These instruments, or some form of these instruments, should be available to help funders and project managers and project implementers in making beneficiary selections, if they have that choice, or in understanding schools which they've been allocated. We looked at a lot of sources. First and foremost was the Chikalulu diagnostic tool, because we were quite familiar with that. And Chikalulu had said to Bridge, we can make it accessible, we can use it. And there had even been a whole M&E COP on it last year, I think. Xenix documents, within various Xenix evaluations and documents, there are a lot of baseline pointers and discussions around functionality. The NIDA reports have a lot of information on that. So do various JET reports. Then, of course, there is this whole school evaluation handbook, which I think you were referring to as well, which is very, very, very detailed. And we have our own sources. We have other communities of practice. We have a principals community of practice. Vanessa's a member of those. And we have the Extraordinary Schools Coalition, which have developed their own school peer review instrument. So we had sources from sort of our Bridge connections that we could draw on as well. We were talking about an initial little something to help the social investor who really doesn't know much about education go in there and get a preliminary understanding of what it is they're dealing with. So that's why we're calling it a school profile guideline. You will see that the word assessment, the word monitoring, the word evaluation, none of those words are in there. Its purpose is simply to initiate a profile, an initial profile for someone who is going to go and do a program in a school. We were making this tool as a preliminary overview, a snapshot, a profile, to help in planning, to help in tightening up or developing one's project plan, and for implementation and project management in general. These are some of our assumptions which I've touched on. Project developers will be allocated schools by DPE, or province or district education departments. There may be exceptions around some of the mines, for example, that do CSI. They would obviously target the schools in the surrounding community. So there is some choice there, although there's not much of a choice in the sense that they are geographical proximity, for example. Project developers will not necessarily have field workers with in-depth knowledge of all phases, curricula, or school management systems related to the proposed project. And project developers have limited time for site visits prior to project sign-off. So these were the assumptions which kind of were the design elements almost for this tool. We had to bear these things in mind. You'll see this process, it's a 4-hour site visit per school. Unlike many other school functionality assessment instruments which take longer, or the Bridge Coalition Schools one is a 3-day school peer review. Chickalula is sort of like it is called rapid, but it takes longer than 4 hours, and so on. So we said there'll be some pre-site visit preparation, there'll be a 4-hour site visit per school, and there'll be a post-site visit profile written up. The supporting resources would include things obviously like an interview questionnaire, which is linked to the indicators that the site visitors would be given, and various other documents which I also won't go through. But there would also be an observation checklist, building on Jonathan Jansen's, what he said about schools. You go into a school, you walk in, you get a feel, you can see. There are certain things you can see just by looking. One of the things we said is if you're a site visitor, you're going there, go at the beginning of the school day. See what's going on. See if kids are actually coming in, or if there's sort of, you know, like this lengthy loitering process where kids are still wandering in or teachers are still wandering in during the first period. Some very basic stuff like that is captured by the observation checklist. Okay, just some of the key questions that came into our mind. Making the guideline fit the purpose. We made a generic guideline, okay, around those domains that we talked about. But obviously, if you are a social investor or a project manager or a funder and you've got a specific plan in mind, you could adapt this instrument for your own kind of needs. Another issue we kind of got quite stressed about is schools aren't static. How do you make a judgment? And I mean, you know, you go in one day, it might look different the next day. Or if you're going to do monitoring and evaluation in a project, obviously you would do a baseline, and then at various key points you would do it. Then you do a final thing because you're measuring change. We're not measuring change, we're just starting up a little, getting your initial snapshot school profile going. But there is this issue of what happens over time. We had a long debate about, do we ask for their results? If it's a primary school, do we look at the ANA results? If it's a high school, do we look at the NSC results? What does this actually mean? Very important one, tensions in the indicators. Well, we really felt nervous about this because you can't be too glib about these indicators. A school might look very clean and orderly, but actually it's like dead. You know, the teaching is really kind of mundane, pedestrian, nothing much is going on. By the same token, a school with a messy environment, which is one of the indicators we always say, look and see. Certainly if it's dirty, that's already a bit dysfunctional. But there may be some fabulous teaching going on. So the issue of professional judgment comes in with these, what we call site visitors rather than evaluators. So that's the need for professional judgment on the part of site visitors. And the issue of compliance, which has also been mentioned. We had a very hard time with this idea of going to look at evidence of learner files or teacher plans or whatever, because it may all look very compliant. First of all, would the site visitors have the expertise to be able to kind of match those things? Second of all, what does compliance actually mean? So we've had some debates around that, and the tool reflects, it's in the process of reflecting it.